Well, our very special guest today, a longtime friend of this show from back when it was an even tinier podcast in 2021, Professor Joe Siracusa. Professor Siracusa is the Dean of Global Futures in the Faculty of Humanities at Perth's Curtin University. An American-Australian, he's a leading expert in American politics, foreign policy and international security. He's authored and co-authored over 30 books, one of which was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in History. Professor Siracusa is a regular commentator in the media in Australia and globally, and it is great to have him with us again. Joe, thanks so much for your time and for joining us on the other side. It's great to see you again.
My pleasure, Damian. My pleasure.
Joe, we've just had Super Tuesday this week. Now, for people who don't sort of get American politics, that's the day when 15 states in the US all simultaneously have votes called primaries, and then they have caucuses, some of them, the political party members, just to decide who's going to be the presidential candidates for each party in the 2024 November elections. And Donald Trump absolutely romped it in, annihilating the last contender that's standing against him, Nikki Haley. He will be the candidate for the Republican Party in November, Joe, unless the powers that be manage to put him in jail or something. What do you think the chances of that happening are now?
Well, Damian, even if they put him in jail, he can still run for president. There's no restrictions on the American Constitution to keep him from doing that. Look, there are two things I can say about Donald Trump today. Number one, he's back and he's the odds-on favorite to become the president of the United States in the general election in November. This is one of the great comebacks. You know, Damian, we all like a comeback story. That's why we like the Rocky movies, things like that. I mean, they're terrible movies, but we love it. We love a comeback story, and so do Australians. This guy, he gets elected president from his television. You know, his only public services that showed The Apprentice. He was on it for 10 years, producer for 2 years. He becomes president of the United States. And then, you know, he's just in office for a few minutes, and then he gets investigated by the FBI, and he survives the Mueller report. And then he survives the change of vote in the House of Representatives. I mean, as soon as you get to 218, you can impeach anybody you want. So he gets impeached once, and then he gets impeached twice. And then he gets accused of an insurrection. And let me tell you, when I went to university in the 60s, I can tell you what an insurrection was. My generation burned 25 cities between 1965 and 1968. Now, that was an insurrection. So anyway, this guy's come back from all these law cases. Trump seems to me to be unsinkable. And he's...
well, the more they throw at him, Joe, the more they throw at him, the stronger he gets. It's a classic case of do they not realise that they're just strengthening him and his narrative?
He's made history. He's won the primary 3 times in a row, and he represents a lot of average Americans. You know, they're not all left or right or blue or red. You know, he represents a lot of people who are struggling. As Bernie Sanders likes to point out, 90% of Americans, probably like Australians, live on their paychecks from week to week. So when inflation gets to be too much, and there is terrible inflation in America, and when you start to have these the cost of increases for your mortgage, your rent, and the rest of it, a lot of Americans are struggling.
So Joe, what about Joe Biden? I mean, can he beat Joe Biden? I mean, it's a very different story when you're out there with the whole electorate.
I've been looking at all the polls, and they call these the binary polls, you know, when you put the two of them together. The New York Times, Siena poll, the Gallup poll, CBS, everybody this week says that Trump could beat Biden tomorrow in an election by 5 percentage points. Okay. So, yeah, I think he's going to beat him. And, of course, President Biden's got his own woes. He's going down the...
Well, that's going to be my next question. Is it going to be Biden?
Well, I have a great interest in Joe Biden's career, Damian. And I'm going to tell you something I haven't talked about in my hundreds of interviews in the last couple of years. Joe Biden and I are the same age. I started working at the University of Queensland as a young man in 1973, and he showed up in the U.S. Senate. You know, I work 15 hours a day. I'm just producing my 50th book in June, as a matter of fact.
Well, you're definitely in a lot better shape than Joe Biden, I've got to say that. But do you think if it's not Biden, who it might be? Have they got anybody else?
Well, they do. It's called the Vice President, Kamala Harris. She's been given some things to do in the last couple of years. One of them was she was tasked with dealing with the American border in the Southwest. She hasn't done a very good job there. In fact, she only found the place once or twice. And Joe Biden has aged very, very badly in office. And now he's shuffling across the stage. He can't remember the words. And it's quite clear to me that he has onset dementia or something very close to that. And frankly, I'm ashamed of the Democratic Party for allowing him to go on in this state. I mean, I think, his attempt to bring calm to the world has brought just the opposite. He kept telling people in Europe and Asia that America is back. Well, actually, America's more chaotic now than it was 4 years ago. He wasn't able to do that. And to be fair to the man, I don't think he can do that. And my God, Damian, is he the guy you want? Is he fit to receive a phone call at 3 a.m. about a nuclear launch? I don't think so. I mean, I think it's scary.
But is Kamala Harris a viable alternative, Joe? I mean, Kamala Harris is a pretty poor performer, really. She doesn't come across as somebody with a lot of depth. She's not that likable.
She looked pretty good in the beginning. She ticked all the boxes. She was a prosecutor and all that kind of stuff. Look, I'm sure she's got many, many fine qualities, Damian. I just haven't seen them yet. I don't think Kamala Harris can beat a dog catcher right now. I mean, her electability as president is just about zero. She can't beat anybody. So the Democrats are in a tough spot. They got a president who's about ready to fall off the tree, and they got a vice president who can't beat anybody.
Could they just bring in a star from the outside? Could they bring in, Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey? I don't know.
Michelle Obama would be a pretty good bet, but she's not going to jump on the Democratic hierarchy and break it up. Governor Newsom would have a better chance of beating Trump, I suppose. A very good-looking politician in California with the perfect family and the perfect background and all that. Now, what the Democrats are doing is holding out that President Biden will be able to run from office without too many debates or going into public too often. Frankly, to keep a man in office, to keep a man in a job that he's no longer fit for, through no fault of his own, it's got a name, Damian. It's called elder abuse. These people who are keeping him in place are criminally negligent, for God's sakes. And what I mean by that is, because the president makes poor decisions, people die. I'm talking about he personally took control of the Kabul exit, and people die. He took control of the Ukrainian war. People have died. And he's screwed up very badly in the Middle East, where American foreign policy is stuck, and the great affection for the state of Israel is falling apart there. So,
yeah, it's sad, and I think Donald Trump is going to be pretty safe in getting into the presidency. Want to talk to you about Israel? We had thousands of protesters turning out in Tel Aviv this week to call on Israel's conservative Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stand aside and to resign. He is not popular at home, Joe. Why is that? Is it because of the number of deaths that we've seen, the way the war has been managed, the 30,000 civilian deaths in 150 days?
He is right now, and has been for many, many months, the most unpopular politician in Israel. He has an approval rating of 15%. Well, Damian, you and I can get 15% walking down the Queen Street Mall. You don't need anything to get 15%. It's very, very unpopular. And while the Israeli people are determined to get rid of Hamas, they're also determined to get rid of this guy. So sooner or later, he knows he's going to go, and he's got a war strategy here that's going nowhere. It's and of course, that attack on October 7th, while Netanyahu had his head in the sand trying to change the judiciary. I blame governments completely if there is an intelligence failure, whether it's Pearl Harbor, whether it's 9/11, whatever it is. If there's a terrible attack and the intelligence community lets you down, the president or the prime minister has to take the blame, because they're at fault here.
So is it because of that? I mean, is that why people don't like him, or do they not like him because he's so hardline in the way that he's handling the war, or are they happy with the way that he's handling the war, and it's more just that they don't like, they don't have faith in him because he let that happen?
fallen out of love with this guy. You know, he's been around about 21, 22 years. They
Yeah.
didn't like him before the war started, okay? What he had on October 7th was he was asleep at the switch. And Hamas came after those villages there, you know, with all the intensity of that terrorists tend to have. And so, you know, he responded. And of course, he's at sixes and sevens right now with the American administration. And Netanyahu is determined to occupy all of Gaza when the conflict is over. He looks like he's determined to get rid of as many Gazans as possible. The Egyptians are too smart for this. They're not going to let them get into Sinai or anything like that. Netanyahu doesn't have control of this anymore. He's up against an enemy that's using innocent people as shields. He's up against an enemy that's hiding all over the place. And you know, and your viewers may know that in urban warfare, nobody is safe. In urban warfare,
Ramadan is coming. I mean, the Muslim holy month of fasting starts next week, and that's been set as a deadline for a resolution on a ceasefire. SBS News is reporting that Hamas negotiators have stayed in Cairo for an additional third day of ceasefire talks. Kamala Harris has been the first senior official to say that there must be a ceasefire for this 6 weeks. She's the first US official to say that. What are our chances, Joe, of getting a 6-week ceasefire, and is that the right way to go?
I think the chances are very little, and I'm not sure it's the right policy anyway. There are probably only 50 hostages left, and Hamas doesn't want these people to get out. These are people who can probably tell you all kinds of stories about what's happened to them, what happened to them when they got there. I mean, they've got some dreadful stories to tell. As I say, there are probably only 50 of them left, and the idea is that Hamas doesn't want to let them go unless they get sort of a track to a permanent ceasefire. And Netanyahu's doing any of this because he's under pressure from the Biden administration to do something. And Biden's people want some kind of relief in there. They want a ceasefire. They want this to stop, okay? You know, they just want this to stop. It's just an optic that they can't watch every day. Not just Arab Muslims in America, but many Americans are sort of freaked out by what they're seeing on the evening news and all these dead children, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, the reason that Benny Gantz went to Washington is because America, the Biden administration, and I'm talking about Biden, Harris, and the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, they've given up on Netanyahu. You know, during the Vietnam War, Damian, if President Johnson or President Nixon didn't like a Vietnamese leader, or even John Kennedy before that with the Diem brothers, we just got a new guy, you know? If we can't get this guy to work for us, we get the next guy. And I think the Biden administration has had a gutful of Benjamin Netanyahu. They've given up on him, so they're going to turn to Gantz, who's going to make his challenge very shortly. And of course, after this, Netanyahu will probably go to jail on some corruption charge, and so he doesn't know what to do.
Final question. Why doesn't the Arab world help more? Why aren't they taking care of the Gazans? Why does Egypt not open the border? Why are we not seeing money flooding in from the rich oil states to help refugees? Or why are the oil states not taking refugees in?
Well, because they don't want to depopulate the place. They believe that the Palestinians have a right to that territory. And if they leave, they will be they'll be complicit in Netanyahu's plan to depopulate the population of Gaza. They don't want to be seen to be part of it. You're quite right. When the Ukrainians were in trouble, 14 million of them left for overseas, probably not going to go back anyway. And, you know, everybody received them. But in this case, the Arab Muslim world is committed to the two-state solution, though there really isn't a two-state solution. It's always been a sort of...
So what's your crystal ball prediction of how this ends, Joe?
Well, I mean, I could say the easy thing, Damian, it's going to end badly. This would be a war of attrition. And, you know, at the end of the day, when they get tired of killing each other, it will stop. And I think it's starting to have negative effects on the Israeli population. You know, when you send all those young reservists into this combat zones, and they see all this death and destruction, and you see all these kids dying of dehydration and starvation, the rest of it, I think it has a morally corrosive effect on the Israelis who would look for some kind of a just solution and it's all going to backfire. I mean, just finally here, I want to say the other day when I saw those American planes dropping food on some beach in Gaza. I mean, Damian, we've reached the point now where American diplomacy is about dropping TV meals, TV dinners on a beach. I mean, it's shameful. We have nothing better to do than give them some food in a little package. We didn't send them water or medicine or anything. It was sort of this hollow gesture. You know, look at us, what we're doing. Anyway, I think Netanyahu will probably go to jail at the end of the day. I think the peace will be one of attrition. That is, when the peace of exhaustion, when there's nothing left to destroy and you can't find anybody anyway. And you're right. I think the Arab Muslim world is going to have to come to the party and rebuild Gaza. I mean, it's gone. I mean, Gaza is gone. Commerce, finance, education, health, the future of all those young kids there. But this all goes back to President Biden. He said that after he beat Donald Trump, that he was back and that America was back in control. As you can see, America's not in control, can't control one of its great allies in the Middle East. We've become bystanders in places where we should have taken the lead, and we're paying a very heavy penalty, but not as much as the people on the ground.
Yeah. Professor Joe Siracusa from Curtin University in Perth, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, Joe.
Okay, thank you.